Welcome to Just in Adulthood. Today we're going to be talking about the one thing that everyone needs, and those are high yield savings accounts and emergency funds. I'm not a financial advisor, but I'd like to give you some of my opinions on personal finances for college students and recent college graduates. It's important to remember some of the things I'm going to talk about are not applicable to everyone. However, I think understanding the topics can really help you later down the road. So the one thing that I think everybody in college or a recent graduate should open up is a high yield savings account. A high yield savings account is really no different than a savings account you'd get at a normal bank. So a normal bank savings account on average pays about 0.09% of interest per year. That means if you had $100 in a savings account in a typical bank, you would only earn 9 cents per year in interest. As you may remember from economics, inflation is typically around 2 to 2.5% per year, which means if you keep money in a normal savings account, you are literally losing money every year. High yield savings accounts are currently paying about 1.3%. This means for every $100 you have invested in a high yield savings account, you'll make $1.30 in interest per year. That number is about 13 times higher than the average savings account and also helps you keep up with inflation. An important thing to note is that high yield savings accounts are flexible, which means the rates can change. For example, when I opened my account, the rate was at 1.55% and is now at 1.3%. So it does not guarantee you will make $1.30 per year. However, it could go down or it could go up. To anyone who's skeptical about losing their money and investing, I have some good news for you. Some of the high yield savings accounts are actually FDIC approved up to the $250,000 limit that your bank is. Therefore, your money is not at risk at all. So you might be wondering, why doesn't everyone just have a high yield savings account if it pays 13 times higher and has no risk of you losing your money? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. The high yield savings accounts don't actually offer some of the things you're typically used to at a normal bank. For example, most high yield savings accounts do not have any form of debit card or credit card associated with the account. They don't have in-person stores or branches, and they don't have ATM machines, which means your money can only be accessed online. It's important to note that that means you will have to have a checking or savings account in one of the big banks to use most high yield savings accounts in order to transfer money in and out. So this kind of leads to the next topic about what are the uses of a high yield savings account. High yield savings accounts should be used for short-term goals such as a wedding, a down payment on a home, Christmas gifts, or just trying to keep up with inflation. The biggest use of high yield savings accounts is probably an emergency fund. Because there is no risk in high yield savings accounts, it's a great place to store your emergency fund. One last note about the uses of high yield savings accounts. High yield savings accounts would not be a good use for your retirement funds. They just don't generate big enough returns. So now I'm going to show you some options for high yield savings accounts and how to open one. I went with Marcus by Goldman Sachs because at the time their interest rate was the highest available. However, it has now dropped to 1.3 and making it very competitive with others.
So now I'm going to show you just some basic offerings from all these high yield savings accounts. So Citibank is offering 1.4% interest, Marcus 1.3%, and then Capital One 1.3%. And there's a ton more, but those are, I guess, are the top three I could find. One thing to note is that with the Citi one, is that they require a $4.50 monthly service charge if you don't have at least $500 in your account. I decided to go with Marcus by Goldman Sachs because at the time they were offering 1.55%. It's important to remember with these high yield savings accounts that the rates do fluctuate. So they could go lower or higher in the future. So now I'm going to take you to the website for Marcus if you were to open an account. You would click Start Saving right here on Marcus.com. And then this is the high yield savings account, and then there's a no penalty CD and then a 1 year actual CD. And so I can go over the differences of those really quick. So high yield savings account is what we've been talking about. A no penalty CD is basically the same thing as a high yield savings account, except you're locked in at that 1.3%. So if you think that the rates are going to go lower, that might be a good option. There's a few more issues with it or cons to it, but that is really the main difference is that you're locked in at 1.3. So this high yield savings account could actually go up and then you would still be at 1.3%. And then just a regular CD is you are locked in at 1.35% and you cannot take your money out. And that is why it's giving you a higher percentage. But anyways, if you wanted to open a high yield savings account, you would click right here on the online savings account, and then it's going to tell you some basic information that they like are trying to advertise to you. But I will say, Marcus does not have fees or a minimum deposit, and they have same day transfers, which is nice because that means even though it's not instant, if you put in a withdrawal request at 10 a.m., they said they'll be able to get it to you by 4 p.m. the same day. And then right here, you can kind of see what I was talking about. So the average for a normal bank is 0.09%. But if you're like me, I bank at Wells Fargo, it's 0.01%. So this is 130 times better. And if you have a lot of money, that can start adding up.
All right, so you open an account right here. You click that open account button. And then you're going to start putting your personal information and linking it to your bank account. Just make sure you have the online savings account selected. So you're going to have to connect the bank account, and that whole process of verifying you and connecting is going to take a few days. So my best advice is that if I remember correctly, you couldn't pull the money out while I was doing that. So be sure that you don't need that money within the next few days. However, then once you have everything in there, and it's verified, then you can always pull your money out the same day, no problem. It's just these first couple days it takes a little bit. And then the only other thing I haven't talked about is that they actually your interest accrues monthly. So what that means is, if you have $100 in there with the 1.3% interest, that 1.3% is for the whole year. So if you look at it on like a per month basis, it's like about 0.1%. And so that 0.1% will go to your account at the end of every month. So it's about to be the end of May. So all of my May interest is about to go on there. So if you pull it out in the middle of the month, you do lose the interest. However, I just wanted everyone to know that it isn't a daily thing, it's a monthly thing. Anyway, so you fill out all this information and then your account is open. So now that you know the basics of a high yield savings account, I want to really dig deeper into what an emergency fund is. So, an emergency fund is actually pretty self explanatory. It's money that you save up to use in case of emergencies. Emergencies include things like flat tires, if you get in a wreck in your car, unexpected medical expenses like you have to go to the ER, if you have to catch a plane ride to go visit a sick relative. It's things that you don't expect to happen. Financial planners recommend that you have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved in case you lose your job. Now, I know a lot of the people watching this are probably in college or just recently graduated college and they do not budget. There's tons of videos on how to budget. However, I understand when you're in college that could be very difficult. An emergency fund in college is going to be a lot different than what it would be like if you had already graduated. For example, if your parents support you in college, then you probably don't need a large emergency fund. However, if you're paying every bill, you probably do need a large emergency fund if you're able to save for it. I understand it might be hard to find room in your budget or just to save money for things like that could happen in the future. However, having an emergency fund even in college is very important. You never know when you're going to pop a tire the night before you have to take a trip home. Therefore, it's probably smart for college students to have a couple $100s at minimum in an emergency fund. The biggest thing I can say though is do not take things out of your emergency fund that are not for emergencies. And if you use part of your emergency fund for an emergency, make it a priority the next couple of months to refill that balance up to a level you're comfortable with. One of the reasons I would actually recommend putting an emergency fund in a high yield savings account is because you can put that money in that account and just forget about it. And furthermore, a high yield savings account is risk free. Therefore, you aren't going to lose half of your emergency fund overnight. At the end of the day, it all depends on what your risk tolerance is. However, I think if an emergency happened, I would want to have all my money that I've put in. If you do open an emergency fund and a high yield savings account, it is very important that you make it a separate account. It's important to not confuse your emergency fund with other savings accounts that you might have. So even if you're in college right now and you have no extra money for an emergency fund, that's okay. Even just putting $10 a month, $5 a month, $1 a month will go a long way. And even if you have no money to put in an emergency fund right now in college, understanding what an emergency fund is really important for when you get your first job. So like I said before, a high yield savings account is a great place for an emergency fund. However, if you don't think an emergency fund is best for you right now, I still think you should really consider a high yield savings account. If you have money that your grandparents left you or your parents gave you or that you earned through an internship sitting in a savings account or a checking account that you don't plan on spending, I would move it to a high yield savings account as soon as you can. It's important to keep money in a checking account for everyday spending. However, that money that you know you aren't going to spend anytime soon would earn a lot more interest in a high yield savings account. So if you've had an internship and you have money lying around, I would recommend that you put it in a high yield savings account. As you begin to learn more about stocks and index funds, you can then transfer it and invest. One really important thing I haven't mentioned yet about high yield savings accounts is that they are savings accounts, which means you can only withdraw from them 6 times per month, just like any other savings account. So even if you're not ready for an emergency fund yet, I think moving some of your money to a high yield savings account would be beneficial for most people. The reason I wanted to start on these topics is because for a high yield savings account, there is no risk as long as it's FDIC insured. And most financial advisors will tell you that an emergency fund is the first thing you need to focus on. Even before retirement, before 401k, before general investing, it is the first thing that most people need to worry about. Having that peace of mind that if something goes wrong, you're not going to be in a financial hardship is really important. So at the end of the day, if you're okay with not being able to go to an ATM or in a bank location and maybe having to wait a few hours for some money, I would really recommend a high yield savings account. They offer way better rates than the traditional banks for a few minor inconveniences. But it is important that you keep your existing bank account so you can deposit checks, you can use a debit card, and you can visit in-store locations. Let me know if there's anything I could do better in the next video or any topics you'd like me to focus on in the future. Thanks.